we have an hour and a half, right? It'd be nice to have like 15 minutes before the board meeting starts.
Just to
You
breathe.
know, and so my thought was kind of,
Yeah.
number one, revisiting the vehicles thing and CIP quickly. And I sent around 2 new scenarios that the staff had come up with that I thought hit a lot of our objectives and helps us kind of keep the budget down. And then we could hit some of the town departments and just finish those off. And then if we had time, we could try doing the library. So that was my thought process for today. And then that leaves us the Board of Ed and the ambulance. And if we have time, we could do those. Or we can slot that.
That's why I'm down here.
So.
Hey, Lauren, can you go on mute?
Sorry.
That's okay.
So if that works, the stuff that was sent around earlier, basically for the trucks, I know Aaron and had asked the question about what if we kept the funding level that we had originally proposed, how much would be required to infuse as a special appropriation so we could still hit all our goals. And that number was like $850,000. And so stepping back and saying, okay, do we really need to, this is assuming we buy these things outright. And I know a lot of us kind of scratch our head, should we be buying these things outright? Should we be paying cash for vehicles? When, if we're going to have a true replacement cycle, the leasing, leasing is just a better way to manage that and manage a replacement cycle as more cost effective in terms of an annual budget. So I asked that they figure out what if we put a special appropriation into the CIP fund rather than going out and buying trucks with it. And then, is there a way to keep the funding at 235, which is what we had recommended earlier, or at least the staff had recommended, and then basically leased a bunch of these heavy new trucks. And then what would that look like? And so that kind of resulted in I think a pretty reasonable scenario. It requires some bump up into CIP the next couple of years, more than 3%. But it does also spread out the replacement cycle, which is also, I know, another thing that Bruce had expressed concerns. And I know like Justin Murphy, when I was on the Board of Finance call, had talked about that we're not getting, all these things loaded up front and then going to be hit with another big, wave of replacements, which that can be managed too. As these things kind of rotate out, we can space out that rotation. So we can always manage the tail of this. But so those are the other kind of, so this is, to me, this kind of came across as a real possibility of, I think the $850,000 one is a lot to put into vehicles to do that special appropriation up front. And then the one that the staff had come up with was $600,000, but then keeping it at $300,000, which is what CIP had recommended. So I think if we're trying to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Frugal, then, the $500,000 lease scenario kind of does that for us. It risks future budgets because now you're going to have to negotiate each year to make sure that funding stays increased in CIP. But it's not unreasonable numbers to increase that base. And I think that it does help us on the budget side, and it also reduces the special appropriations recommendation.
Peggy, is that your recommendation, or are you just presenting the numbers?
Yeah, I guess it is my recommendation because I think leasing is the better way to go in the long run. I think, I'd like to keep the budget down as much as possible. And it also, doesn't require as much of a special appropriation, which I know the Board of Finance is talking a lot of different things of doing with that besides what we're talking about. They've got a list of things that they're thinking about. So it would provide some flexibility there. Now, it always is that argument, lease versus buy. Everybody makes that math analysis, but leasing has served us well. It allowed us to improve the fleet a couple of years ago. The police department does leasing. I mean, and then what we can do is look into doing a master lease agreement, which is more cost effective on pricing. We might be at a critical mass point where we might be able to tap that market. Kristen, I don't know if you want to talk more to that. It's not a guarantee, but the package and the portfolio might look more attractive where we could do a master lease.
Hi, everyone. The one thing I will say is the leasing program that we have in place right now, because the past few years have been kind of waiting out this study to be completed. When we started it 5 years ago, I struggled a little bit to find banks that were looking for the small numbers that we were working with. This, having a solid 5-year plan with basically a $2.4 million ask over the 5 years, I believe will open us up to more options, hopefully translating into even a better interest rate. And for me, maybe even translating into a smoother annual, uptake of each loan. It might be a little easier, just paperwork side in here. But the numbers, I think, will reflect and help us in the long run.
So are we looking at line 30? Is that the annual budget that we're working towards?
Yes. So what we did, Bruce, is we started with the 235 and then increased it. I mean, you've been through the CIP process to see what it would need to be, with the end goal being to get up to $350,000. Looking at the total vehicles and equipment, it looks like it's about 3.5 million. So dividing that over 10 years, 350 to us seemed like a good annual goal. And this would get us to that, in that position.
Okay, and then in the out years, you would just see some small escalator just for financing and stuff like that.
Yep.
So
Kristen brought it out, and we added, after starting year 6, 3% a year.
Okay, so 350 is the number we're working towards.
Yes. Correct.
What's the 2.7 there, Stace? How does that, just do the math? How does that work?
This would be what it would cost to purchase all 33 vehicles / equipment. So this is the amount that would come out of the fund every year for the first 5 years. And then this is the remaining of the lease payments. I don't have the title, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But that would be the total cost if we did this leasing program. If we didn't, and those are my little numbers over here, Scott, so you set me up for that. If we did this special appropriation for the 846, we would be spending 2.714 versus 2.769. So in order to spread this out over the 5 years and not do an 846 special and do a 500, it's just costing us an extra 54,000 over the life of these.
But with both the yellow and the red scenarios there, they're both lease options.
They are
other. It's just a different upfront.
Yep. Other than this year one, this is year one. This is this current year. This would be a special appropriation to purchase a total number of 7 vehicles. But going forward, yes, you're right. We're back on the leasing program.
And what's the difference between the green at the top? Just so
this was a 600,000 special appropriation where we would just get the 3 big trucks. And here we would get the 7 trucks with the 7 vehicles, including 3 trucks.
But also highlight, the green assumes we go with 300,000 in this year's budget for that line.
Correct.
Item CIP versus the other 2 are 235.
So it's lower in the annual every year.
Yes.
Right.
And to highlight, in these 2 scenarios, we're getting all 33 vehicles and 2 pieces of equipment. In this scenario, we're only getting 30. So we're kind of shorting ourselves within the next 5 years. It is in years 6 and out. But you can see in these two scenarios, we're getting the total of the 33 recommended vehicles and equipment.
So the red just, I mean, seems like a no-brainer.
I mean, I think it is, but you know, it's that trade-off. It's costing you more because you're financing things.
Right, but it's less of a special appropriation up front.
Yeah.
A lot less.
So Stace, the 500,000 goes into the rolling reserve balance for that account.
Yeah.
Correct.
And presumably we're spending in the first couple of years before we get to the 350, we're spending more than what the reserve balance would have. And so the 500,000 gets us to that year 5, where the annual funding then takes over.
Correct.
Okay.
And in theory, we could get some interest, right, on the 500. There's a little bit of an offset.
Bitcoin.
And we may have trade-ins. This does not assume
You get to do it,
credit.
Bruce.
I like phasing the vehicles in. I think, you know, we're mid-execution on our leasing strategy. We've already done 20 some vehicles that way. And
yeah,
I think it's a plan that works.
I think
well
16 in 1 year is crazy too. I mean, that's a lot of vehicles all in 1 year that are then going to be re-up that same cycle.
Right. So I think that makes the most sense. And I think with regards to the recommendations about the makeup of the fleet, you know, we go with the ones that are in the heaviest need, and we make a concerted effort to stay within one brand. That
for buying power.
Well, no, for consistency's sake. I think if they're all of a similar make, then they're going to be more familiar to the crew. They're going to be easier to arrange for maintenance. You know, we don't need any exotic trucks in the fleet.
We're not getting Teslas.
Well,
I'm working on the electric vehicles.
So all kidding aside, is John comfortable with yellow or red?
Yeah, I think John is on here. And John, go ahead.
Yes, either scenario.
Oh, hey, John.
Hi, Scott.
I didn't realize you were there.
Either scenario works for our department. I think.
You're just happy with new trucks, aren't you?
Exactly. And so, you know, I don't have really a strong opinion on the financial plan and how it gets accomplished. But I thought the last scenario makes sense.
Yeah, and when we were, just so you know, Scott and John, you could back me up on this. We must have, when Kristen was running 5,000 scenarios, our main goal was to make sure John could run his department the most effectively. And his input was he needed these 3 huge trucks. So we did make sure in either scenario, he was getting these 3 heavy trucks in year 1 or within the next few months.
Cool.
Okay, so
Thanks, John.
I mean, is everybody comfortable with that? Aaron, I don't, you good with that? Because that allows us to keep the nut down a little bit on the budget.
I'm good with that.
Okay. And Al?
Yes.
Okay. All right, great. Well, we'll do this. We'll plan on having that be our recommendation as part of the budget. Okay, thanks. And since John is here, I thought we could talk about the engineering position. Is everybody agreement with that? I think the you know, John has already kind of walked through, you know, the needs, the history of the department, you know, and just the staffing resource constraints they had. And I would echo all that.
But he's getting new trucks.
I know. I know. I would echo that. I would say though that I think one of the things we need to do over the next year is really look at more broadly our organizational structure, and we kind of talked about that a little bit when we went through the merger of Beach and Recreation and Senior Services. And so I feel like we need some more time to sort through Public Works versus Building and Grounds and kind of how these groups look. But also feel we do need some more resources in this department. And so, and another point I want to raise, and we're going to be talking about it tonight with this coastal resiliency discussion, if this new ordinance gets revised the way it is, there's going to be a lot more requirement for the floodplain ordinance, whatever they're called, manager or whatever, to be physically much more involved in the inspection process. And so that's also going to possibly put a strain on his department. The Coastal Resiliency Commission feels very strongly that it needs to be the town engineer's job to oversee that whole process. So I think that's also going to layer an element of demand on the department's time. So, my thinking is, we talked about possibly doing, and Deb had suggested, what if we were to hire somebody on a part-time basis this year? And then, see where the needs are coming from, see what happens with the ordinance, and then see if it does warrant at one point stepping up into a full-time position. And then we've also looked at trying to outsource, bringing in an engineering firm on a project by project basis where we'd have like a contractual relationship with the firm. And we still want to do that. John and Rob are looking into us, entering into some sort of contractual relationship, because we spend a lot of time bidding for things, which if we just had a firm online with committed pricing and resources to go to, I think we could end up saving ourselves a lot of money. So we're going to be looking into that. So the other option would be, rather than doing a part-time person, is to put some additional money into that kind of resource. And I know when I'd spoken to John about this, his thought was it's not going to be very cost effective. They need more boots on the ground, people to send out to job sites. And so I think that there are a lot of different options. If we had in the budget a part-time position there, that we could figure out, what would be most, I think, beneficial to them to help relieve their workload. So that was my thinking on that position, is maybe moving that, instead of asking for the full position right now, is trying to maybe request. Deb thought $35,000 might be adequate for a part-time position.
And that would still work for John?
So, what my position is on this. I feel we need a full-time position, but it certainly would help. I think getting somebody part-time that's in here, on a regular basis, that can help us with the public works side of things would be more helpful to the department than an engineering consultant overall. That's my feeling on it. Though, both are needed really, but I see the sort of the public works everyday duties that we have being more helpful to alleviate the workload.
So any thoughts from anybody else?
No, it would be nice if we could have some sort of benchmark that we can look at in a year and say, this was a good ad, that it actually accomplished something. So if there's a measure, John, that you can come up with that gives us feedback that adding the resource actually resulted in the improvements here that you're shooting for in your description, I think that would be great. And I don't know.
Benchmark, Bruce, or just accomplishments? I mean, I would
Oh.
think just demonstrating, workload accomplishments would, to me, certainly justify the resource as opposed to a benchmark.
I think
Maybe that's
it's
what you were
really,
saying, though.
yeah. I'm just thinking, and I don't want to decide what that is because I just don't know what it is, but just some evidence that we moved the ball forward.
I think that's very possible. In fact, when I started as a public works director, one of the first things I did is start to quantify and collect data on things that we do every year. Like, for instance, the amount of paving we do, the amount of repairs, guardrail repairs, catch basin cleaning, everything that's all the public works annual maintenance work that we do. I've started collecting that data. So just for just to look at the performance of this department and see where we're at. So I think I think that's definitely something that we can do if we get somebody in here to help to show what impact that has on our, on our performance, on all these different aspects that we do here. I can quantify very, really tangible evidence, I think, on the impact on performance that will have. Now, I think about this, I could easily keep somebody very productive 100% of the time with just the amount of work here.
Well, one of the things to look at is in your proposal, you're saying that you receive about 550 requests. I think you used the word complaint, but let's use the word request.
I did say complaints. I'm surprised by that, actually, now that I look at that.
But if that 550 right now is currently being addressed, in a 3 or a 4 day time frame, and we add this person, can we move that to a 1 and a 2 day time frame? I'm making those days up. I don't know how long it really takes, but that's what I'm talking about, Scott. That we've improved, some measurable
speed
way.
or something, right? Yeah. Well, I guess my
Yeah, you're totally
it-
chopping up.
I don't know how to fix that.
Better internet service.
Yeah, helpful, Peggy, helpful. I need 75 grand.
Well, I think that the project kind of throughput thing is something that overall we need to be better about tracking, and we've started, at least, I think, getting a better handle on all the projects in town, and then maybe tracking that, from start to completion. The more that we can improve that, I think always the better. The complaint piece is an interesting one, because we have the ability to track those complaints, because Beth Ann logs everything into, and that's not everything in town, but it's the one that kind of fall in John's lap, right? So there is kind of a way that we could actually calculate that, right? Because you close them out in the system, don't you? It's kind of like a ticketing system.
We do close them out. We have many that are open that are just sort of wish lists, like drainage improvements in some area in town that never rise to the top priority. And that have been there, existing issues that have been there a long time. So, we close them out when we can.
Well, yeah, you think about it as bringing them to resolution. If the resolution is that there's nothing to be done for it, then it's resolved, right?
Right.
If the resolution is actually doing something, then that is what it is. So, Peggy, you're right. This is already something we're tracking. Presumably, it's something that impacts residents more or less directly, since they're the ones registering the concern with us. So it would make sense that that's a good one for us to measure the success of the strategy lie.
Yeah, and I think that's something we can do already in certain departments, and something that we can do in other departments too, as we start to try to track things better. So so we can try to endeavor to do that.
Hey, Peggy, given we're resource constrained, is this,
Yeah.
Are you suggesting that you're sort of thinking that the 35 grand is a better solution than the full-time person, sort of ease into it as opposed to?
Well, I'm just trying to be conscious of the budget. I think clearly we need more resources in public works. I'm just trying to step back and be conscious that, we want to be thoughtful about the budget requests. They are getting a lot of new vehicles, and I just thinking that I think it would be good also just to really think through structurally and everything over the next year, as we've talked about. And so, I mean, look, if this board said we definitely support the $75,000 for the additional engineering assistant, I'm 100% behind that. But I'm just sensing that there's a lot of pushback on new staff. And so this was kind of a compromised way to get additional resources. And then if we feel like this is a really good thing and we should be ramping it up to that full-time position, or if we reorganize a little bit, and redeploy, we might want to add more, then it's eased us into it from a budget standpoint. So that was my thinking.
So yeah, the only thing I would maybe throw a wrench in is if we were to say today that in a year we'll be considering adding from the 35 up another 75 for another full-time person, and we will have added a person and a half when the request is for one person, we're better off with the one person now than we are with the person.
Right, biting the bullet, right.
So if we think that we can transition this part-time position into a full-time position,
or keep part-time. I mean, who's to say that we even need the full-time?
I just saw it as offering more flexibility, right? Okay. And then looking at the different departments and how they interface and everything. So that was my thinking, is to kind of keep some flexibility. That's all. I think there's clearly a need. And it is one of the departments that has seen similar to land use, has seen their departments shrink the last 5 years as people retired. And so I feel like we're trying to kind of right size these again a little bit, and get resources back into these, which are fundamental, services that the community expects. Plus, we're going to have a lot of projects coming up. So, as we move forward, and this is what I guess I was trying to, as we move forward, and when we see Beach and Rec, I think moving out of infrastructure and into more program management, I think more of the kind of bigger infrastructure type projects like the Surf Club, and other things really should be falling within public works. At least they should be championing these projects versus
from an engineering standpoint.
Right. And getting more involved in it. And a lot of times they're not involved in these at all. And so historically, Scott has just gone out and handled the whole RFP process and pulls in John occasionally, right, John? But you're not leading the charge on these big infrastructure projects. So that's what I was saying. Like, I think we got a lot of moving parts right now. So I was trying to figure out a way to get some help. Let's rethink like where some of the stuff should land and what's the right staffing for these departments.
Yeah, I mean, if I could just jump in here quickly and just say, not with regard to this specific request from John, but just generally speaking, I think we get requests for more people, more manpower. And I guess the question that I would have, or I'd want to know is, are we looking at, like, what are we doing to look at from like a very high level? Are we, for example, are the departments focusing on things we want them to? Are they in the right places? Like, to your point, Peggy, because I do think that we can't, when when the town departments come to us and say, like, we're struggling here, I don't think we should just say, well, too bad, because we don't have enough money. But I don't necessarily believe that
or throw resources at them. I think
I don't necessarily believe that more is always better. Like, what are we doing to look at what's going on and saying, are we doing things the right, could we be doing things differently? Are departments focusing on the things that we as a town are prioritizing? And I don't know the specifics of what the departments do, so I'm not trying to jump in and say that, but I think from my perspective, it would be helpful, and maybe, just to understand, are we doing some more of that? Are we doing training for staff? Are we doing professional development? Like, all of those things, I think, lead to a department that's, productive and efficient and all of that. And I understand we're not, corporate America, but I still think that there are some principles that maybe we could adopt so that we're kind of balancing everything.
No, I agree that, I think right now, to be honest, I think most people are just keeping their heads above water. And, that's why I'm trying to think through, like, what makes more sense, for different roles and responsibilities across the departments. And so, and I do think the answer, even if we go through this process over the next 12 months, looking at the organizational structure of the different departments, I think this particular function needs more support, no matter what. I don't envision us deciding we need less people with engineering background or project management background. I was talking to somebody about, should this be like a project management role, not a engineering, but a project manager who is more just going out, making sure things get done, following up with contractors, that kind of job, versus actually like engineering skills and looking at drawings. That's all, that's part of, I think, the thought process that we need to go through. So, but we just haven't, it's just, we haven't been able to do that. That's where my thought was, at least having a part-time position allows us to test run some things, perhaps, rather than making a commitment. But you're right, we've got this person that we brought on, and then we'd have to figure out, how they would fit if we moved things around or altered, what responsibilities fell within the Public Works Department. So.
Well, part-time gives us a heck of a lot more flexibility in the sense that they're not on benefits and all that, and you're not making a long-term commitment per se. So it still addresses some of John's needs. Maybe doesn't get it all the way there. But Aaron, I agree. I like kind of where you were going with that in terms of just, efficiencies and ensuring that we're, meeting the needs of the public, but also ensuring that we're doing things in an operational, efficient way. Who's to say what that end game is? I think, the right projects, working with senior staff, but, I think could we continue to refine that? I'm sure the answer is yes.
Peggy, is part of your thinking here that to make this part-time instead of full-time, because you're concerned about the overall budget increase for this year? I've kind of lost track where we are with that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, be very thoughtful, because I know there's been a lot of people concerned with, staff and creating new positions and staff requests. And so, that is my thinking, because it is adding new positions. And, we have 2 other departments that are also doing the same thing, or 3 actually. So, so I'm just trying to be conscious of that.
Well, I mean, the budget process is always iterative. We have to go through it, get to the end and see where we're at, and then decide whether or not we need to go back and redo it again. And it sounds like you put a lot of thought into this, Peggy. And if your recommendation is for the 35, I'm content to let that go through, and we can see what the budget looks like, and then make a decision that that's good or not at the time, right? Because that's where we're headed anyways.
I'm good with that. I think Bruce articulated it very nicely.
Okay. All right, good. Aaron, you're good with that too? Scott?
I'm in.
Okay.
Sure.
But we're saying 35, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever that part-time
Yeah.
works out to be.
And I'm gonna just confirm, because I had this conversation with Deb a couple weeks ago. I'm just gonna confirm with her with that number. And I'm now going, oh God, was it 40? I want to double check that with her, but I will update you if she said 40 now, because I know we bannered around about what if a part-time person would cost. She was gonna look into it. So put in your note, include possible 40. So
Can you do a range? Can you do a range? Yeah.
yeah. It was just, I just didn't want to get, all of a sudden I was like looking at my notes. So, okay. So good. So we got through that. Next one, I thought, so John, you're good to go if you need to go.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Next one, was the fire marshal, I think I had on my list. And this was the additional hours that I think, I'm very supportive of this. And we talked about this also during the budget process or the special appropriation, I guess it was, the additional hours. Anybody have an issue with this?
I'm good with it.
Yeah, I don't see a need to spend a lot of time. We're talking about.
Oh, let's make Sam get on and grovel.
Sam doesn't grovel.
Okay. And then the other one is the town clerk. And that was another one. We had a long talk. And, when we talked about adding it for this past year, and I think the only information I think it's important to add to this is two other things that didn't really come out, I think, when Nancy had her conversations about this needing the additional hours, because I know there's been discussion about the previous manpower study and everything else, but it was kind of two things. One is that, the town clerk is, in my view, should be responsible for minutes and posting, for the boards and commissions and posting agendas, and be really the primary source of information for these things for the public. And what I'm finding is that it is it's all over the map when you look at how our town is doing it right now. And that's partly because Kristen Panzo, part of her job is really supposed to be overseeing that process, but because she doesn't have the time to do it, it gets kind of thrown around. And I will say a lot of it ends in Lauren's lap. And I've had a lot of frustration with, the minutes, meeting minutes and videos not getting posted, in a timely fashion and all this other stuff. And then you layer in a bunch of ad hoc committees that the board has added over this last year, which I'm guilty of, and more to come, in terms of these additional meetings that we're responsible for FOIA. Plus you layer in the video piece of it, which is likely to continue even after the state of emergency, I'm guessing, although we don't know what the final decision is going to be for FOIA. So any help for the town clerk's office, in my view, allows some of that stuff that's getting handled outside of the town clerk's office to get pushed back into the town clerk's office. So that's one thing that didn't really come up when we were talking with Nancy. The second piece is it is a very high likelihood that the state is going to be moving to more either early voting or, more easy, no excuse absentee voting. And that is also going to sustain a much more labor intensive voting process for the town clerk's office. Though that's very much likely to happen. So I just think it's further support of her ask, which is based on more just transactional activity going up over the last year. But I think that, this is going to be, both of these things. I feel really justify even further her desire to have this person become a full-time employee. So that's my 2 cents on that position.
You had me at Nancy.
Okay. So
the only thing I'd like to do, Peggy, is I'd like to keep the issue of the minutes separate. The town clerk is responsible for hosting, and having the official copies of the minutes. A conversation of how we administer getting those minutes to the town clerk's office, I think, is a separate conversation. And I'm worried that mixing that extra work up in this conversation just adds a whole new layer of confusion to it. So I think either the request stands on the initial argument that was made a month or 2 ago.
Well, no, but this is just, I'm giving you my perspective of what I'm seeing. Nancy made her argument. I think it stands on its own, but I'm just saying there's another layer here that she's probably not necessarily aware of, right?
Well, and also too, I think this little couple sentence paragraph here doesn't really do justice to the description that Nancy gave us too.
Right.
Well, but Peggy's point, your point though, is kind of, so my takeaway from what you just said is, yeah, there's a big difference to throw additional resources at something if it's going to be used to take on additional projects or to realign things that have maybe, that have not been realigned. But what I heard is that it's going to basically just allow us to do what we've been doing all along. Like there's not enough people to
what
do
I'm
what
saying
we're.
is there's things that in that department.
No, I know what you're saying, Peggy. But what I'm saying is in the request, which is very different. It's like we need more people so that we can do what we've been doing.
Right. But
and just keep doing it. But that's 2 different things. So
but if they're not meeting, but I'm not sure I agree with you, Aaron, because if they're not meeting the demands of the public or can't, do something in a timely manner, then they're not being efficient. That was her point of the request, is that, the time lag to do a request, or they can't fill requests because there's just not enough people to do it.
Well, I guess that's my question. Is it just that we need more people, or is that we need to look at how things are getting done, or that kind of goes back to the point I was making earlier.
Probably both.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, I think it's similar a little bit with the engineering discussion in the sense that, our response time would be higher if there were more resources in the department, right? I think it's the same with the town clerk's office. And in order to, I think, to be responsive to the public, to what Nancy feels is appropriate, it's just coming out of her. I mean, it's her. So, it's one of those things that, it's like, and I'm sure Chief Drum will say the same thing. He ends up showing up on 4th of July. He ends up staying late in, the department heads end up absorbing a lot of this, and John will probably echo the same thing. And that's what I've seen. So, you still have to get the work done and you still have to be responsive. So,
and that's because there's not enough people, or is that for other reasons?
Well, that partly, I think in Nancy's case, it is an issue of lack of, needing more hours, dedicated hours to process and go through and complete transactions.
Mm-hmm.
And already, and I'm just looking at it selfishly, but there's another function here that I feel should more be in her office, but they don't have the capacity to even do that. So it's falling to other departments. So
and that's exactly my point, Peggy. That the case that Nancy was making for these hours did not include that extra work of the minutes that you're talking about, and I think that we would not be taking a step forward if we were to add this amount of money to her budget and then add even more work onto it. I think that she would be taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back from a workload perspective.
Right. And she would absolutely probably agree with what you're saying. So, but I'm just saying, I'm just giving you an assessment of what I'm seeing in terms of just there's even more stuff out there that she's not accounting for in her request that I also see putting additional pressure on her department. So at a minimum, I feel like we should be doing this to get her those resources.
It almost sounds like we're in violent agreement here, but do we have opposition to this, or are we in?
So I have one more clarifying question, and maybe I'll point this one at Stacy. We've talked around the idea that the 10,600 is not the total impact to the budget, that there are going to be other lines in the budget impacted by adding a person who then comes on to benefits. And I don't think we've ever gotten a really good answer, at least not that I've noted, on what that other impact is. And so I appreciate that the salary increase is the 10,630, but can we get a sense of what other lines are going to be impacted and by how much?
And what we typically value a family benefit plan is at $28,000. However, for this upcoming budget, we won't see that because it's based on historical claims because we're self-insured. But in the future, that's typically what we value a family plan at $28,000.
Okay, so in a future year, we would expect to see a bump of about that.
I mean, a bump, again, it's based on, it's self-insured. It's not a premium. It's not like we just add 28,000 for an extra FTE. But that's what we use in order to do projections, and it won't come into effect for a year or two once we start to see the claims, but we value a family size plan at $28,000.
I'm on the call, so what?
Right.
But in that same 1 to 2 years, you could also have somebody else dropping off the plan too that could offset it. So, I mean, it's hard. I would imagine it's sort of hard to project this because it's a bit of a moving target.
It's so hard, especially it's based on claims. You know, we could have a year with a bunch of babies where the claims skyrocket and it has nothing to do with FTEs. So it's really hard, right. But we do use, that's typically the value we use for a family plan, but it is very hard to quantify it.
Right. And I'm not supposing that we artificially inflate the budget here by that amount, but I do think that we add people with our eyes wide open and understand that it's not just a salary line.
No, it's a fair point. It's a very fair point. We
Agreed.
Want to know total cost. I'm with you.
And we're self-insured, so there's a certain amount up front that we pay 100% of the benefit for as a town. And then it shifts over to insurance. So, okay, but in round numbers, the long-term effect averages out to about $20-some thousand.
That's typically what we've used. You know, like when we did the early retirement, we said we'd be saving $28,000 for a full-time employee. That's what we use. But again, it's based on claims. It's based on historical claims as well as trends. So it's really hard to just narrow in on that 28,000 saying that's what it's going to eventually cost, because it may not. The claims for that one individual may not amount to much at all. But that's pretty much a formula driven, total employees, total claims, and administrative fees. It's pretty much a formula that comes out to the 28,000 per FTE.
Is that based on our claim experience though, or is that just a figure that that is based on our claim? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And is there, do we ever pay cash in lieu of the benefit?
Yes.
So if we take somebody on full-time and they don't take the town's health insurance, do they get a cash bump?
Yes.
And what is that?
It's about $4,000 a year versus the 28.
And we don't know that until somebody actually declines or accepts the insurance plan, right?
Right.
Right. So are we comfortable with this or not? I'm just looking at the
I am
time.
very comfortable with it. It's $10,000.
I know.
I would suggest we move on, but all good. I think we got bigger issues to go figure out here.
Because I think then that basically gets through the town staff stuff. And then we just have the outside groups.
Do we have any sense right now relative?
Do we have anything else left? Sorry, hold on.
I don't think we landed on the Christmas light issue. I think we kind of had penciled that one in, and we probably need to check it off.
Holiday lights, Bruce.
That's a fun one.
The holiday lights.
Yes.
I guess.
Yeah, I think this was one where we were thinking, we're ideally going to try to find a more cost-effective way to provide this. So the question is, do we want to budget for what it cost us last year? Or do we want to just maybe come up with amount of money that we can then use to go and use that as our benchmark to figure, to pay for this somehow, figure out another solution. I think we need to do the lights, that's for sure. So there's an expectation there. I just don't have an answer if there's a more cost-effective way to do it. We could round it to 10,000 and just say, okay, this is the pool of money you have, and go bid it out.
What's the difference between 10 and 13?
I
think if you're, we need to put a number in there. We're all in agreement that we want to do this again. And if we find out that it costs us $5,000, then in the next cycle, we just budget 5,000.
So what are you suggesting? We're put 10
Put it in for 13.
I am all in for 13. Let's move on.
So, okay. All right. All right. And then
can I just ask maybe a bit more of a macro question? So do we have any sense where we are right now relative to all the decisions we've made? I know like in years past, that's what I wanted to see. She had it ready too. Did you see that?
So the only thing, Scott, this does include the items you haven't discussed yet. So it does include the ambulance. It includes the library. I could take them out and show you where we're at
2.34%.
Correct, with everything. That includes everything in this column. So it includes the ambulance. The yellow highlights are things that we did not make final determination, but it includes it. So worst case scenario, yes.
We're in a worst case scenario at 2.34%.
Yes.
Hallelujah.
So that includes the adjustment to CIP.
It includes the 160. It does not include the extra 65,000. So it includes CIP as it was originally submitted before the committee added the 65,000.
And what about the truck thing that we talked about at the beginning?
That's 170 to 235. What's that?
Stace, what about that? What about the truck thing that we did at the beginning?
Yep. So that brings up, it's 65,000 is included, which is the 235 annual funding, not the 300. I took out the additional. It just happens to be 265,000s, but I took out the 65,000 to bump up the funding to 300.
Okay.
So this is CIP at the highway truck at 235.
Okay. And then the other thing I just want to raise is that you'll hear about tonight, we're planning to refinance some of our bonds. And the estimated savings range on that would be $20,000 to $24,000. And we thought about, you put that in already. Or you
did.
Oh, darn.
Yes, continue. This is a great find. Go for it.
So that should help us in terms of reducing our interest expense, obviously. If we can get that moving in, that will be closed before the budget's voted on, right? That'll be closed
in April, hopefully.
Yeah. So that will be some savings that, the range was $20,000 to $24,000, I think. And so that was another little help to the numbers. So can you go back to the other thing? So the operating budget. Okay. And what were we at before? I'm just going blank again. I don't have that piece of paper. Oh wait, I do. All right, so we were at 4.3. Okay. All right, so I think we've done some, and we're at 2.34. And the budget that we had voted on last year, I think was higher than that, wasn't it?
The total
Yeah.
for last year was 2.18. And that was a 5.01 for the town. So 5.01 compared to this 4.29, and then 0.87 for the Board of Ed compared to the 1.4.
Okay. So we're actually,
We're already under what was last year. So wait, so the
Yes.
town part of the budget though is 4.29.
Yes.
no, it's
Okay.
4 point, well, I'm looking at the operational, it's 4.12. Oh, but you're including the debt service and all that. Yeah, I'm talking about the operating budget. So
The operating
Yeah.
last year was 5.12.
okay. So all right, so we're at a point below where we were last year. So we really just have these three groups, which are the outside organizations to talk about, the library, the ambulance, and the Board of Ed.
When are we doing those tonight?
Well, we can decide what we want to do here. Do we want to just tackle those in another meeting, or do you want to knock off one? It was 6:30, and we do have a 7 o'clock board meeting. So, I
Are
mean,
there any that are
are there any
easier than
questions?
others?
I mean, no one's asked for anybody to come back. I haven't gotten any requests. So,
Board of Ed.
so
I'm comfortable with the Board of Ed budget.
Yeah.
Can you scroll up to the,
Yep. Do you want to vote on the
ambulance?
CIP to just continue with the 160? Do you want to get that just so I could highlight that? And this was just bumping up to what the committee recommended, other than the additional 65,000.
yeah,
I'm
I
good
was
with it.
very supportive of CIPs.
I'm good with that. I'm on CIP.
Okay.
Anybody
then
else?
the other-
Anybody else out there? Alice, give it a thumbs up.
I don't know.
I'm fine.
The CIP was fine.
Okay. Yep. I'm okay.
Do we want to talk about Board of Ed and get that done? Or is that a longer conversation?
I'm 100% supportive of the Board of Education budget.
I don't have any questions.
I'm supportive of the Board of Ed budget as presented.
I wish we had more clarity to where all the grant money was going, but
I know they're meeting about it though, Bruce, I think, based on the conversation with Gene, right? So, I mean, they are addressing it or having a conversation about it. I don't know about addressing it, but they're talking about it.
So,
So do you want to wait then until that discussion is had?
I'm not sure
no,
we
I
can.
mean, it sounds like,
Okay.
I mean, it sounds like the mood of the board is to support it. I can't really point to anything and say, no, we shouldn't be supporting it. I mean, it is what it is. They're standing up and saying they need all of these positions. And
you know, you totally support a math specialist, right? Interventionist. I said my wife's job wrong.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of variables out there with grant money and everything else. The bottom line, though, is that whatever, whatever gets reimbursed can go back into the coffers, right? At the end of the year.
Well, it can, except that it institutionalizes the spending and creates a new base. And it's easier if the base never gets increased than to try to reduce the base.
But isn't a majority of the grants though, Bruce, related to COVID and current time that we're in right now, as opposed to, so I would think the base wouldn't necessarily move.
Well, and so that gets back to,
I mean, one of the things in there was PPE, right? I mean,
but I think it also, if you look at the bottom line is that if we end up going forward with the some sort of school plan, I think it's better that this helps, when you talk about the base, you're going to have this other increase coming anyway. So this eases into that increase. And then there might have to be decisions made later about programs, to keep the budget in a smooth kind of, reasonable growth projectile. So, but I think that's a conversation that should be had later. I think the fact that we can actually get, the money, it's not like the board is just going to keep the money. They always give back at the end of the year. So the town will end up benefiting from that in the general fund.
Yeah, I mean, we move this forward. It's not our place to go and dissect a line item. I think we receive the number in the spirit that the board has provided it to us, as this is their best estimate of what they need.
I agree.
Okay.
So that's Board of Ed. So now what about ambulance and?
So hang on, for the Board of Ed, since it is a separate referendum question, can we actually take a motion and vote on the Board of Ed in total, and then we could do the town after you deliberate on the ambulance and the library? Is that okay?
Do we actually motion and workshop?
So I'll move that we push the budget of 59,372,037 forward for referendum.
I'll second that.
I will second you, Bruce.
All in
You can
favor?
pick whoever you want. Aye.
Well, a discussion, I should say. I mean, Erin, I'm worried Erin is sitting there. We haven't heard from her. So discussion real quick, Erin.
Thank you, Peggy, but I'm good.
Okay.
I'm on board with.
Okay.
She's totally eating. She's totally eating her
dinner.
I am eating. She's totally eating her dinner right now. That's not cool, by the way.
And I'm listening. Hey, I have been going nonstop all day.
You got busted.
All right. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Right. Great. Okay.
2 items left.
Okay. You're just jealous, Scott.
I'm totally jealous. You kidding me? I was thinking maybe I could have a little bowl of nuts here or something.
I'm eating my dinner and I'm watching my family eating dinner in the other room.
I think Wendy's still at school, so I have nobody here. So,
so I had my thought was the library, just because we've had so many different conversations about the library. And I know Bruce.
Well, which one? Can we just ask which one of library or ambulance are easier to solve? Because if the ambulance we're all in on, let's just be done with it.
I'm good with the ambulance.
I'm good with the ambulance.
Me too.
And to be clear, we're at the 302 number, right? Not the
correct.
Correct. Not the 264 number.
Correct. Are you good with that, Bruce?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm good with it.
Okay. Good. All right. We don't do a motion on that though. We just do the whole budget, right? So.
Yep.
Okay. So the library. I know we all got emails today.
More than a few.
Yeah. Can I ask a question about that? So I saw the information that went out from the library asking people to support the budget. So is that true that the library laid people off last year?
I know there were retirements. I'm not sure about laying off.
I'm not sure, Aaron, if they were talking about last year, or if they were talking about when they downsized to North Madison. When they actually.
They had to lay
Yeah.
off people when they went to the smaller space.
Yeah.
when they did
Okay, well,
production, yeah.
that makes sense. But it was like 2 years in a row. I think there was a reference to that, and I was just surprised by that. I didn't realize that, and I thought that the PPP this year, the point was so that people didn't get laid off.
Well,
But
they
aren't
had,
many of them hourly anyways? So they're not really laying them off. They're just not paying them hourly for now. They're on hiatus. I know it's semantics.
Stacy, real quickly, what is the library's total request? Because I know all these documents always just have the increase, the actual dollar amount that they're requesting now
I
again.
believe the requesting or what we're rolling over at this point. So last year was 1.304. So if we add this 242, 1.546, which includes their operating budget as well as the mortgage on the house, the capital mortgage, which is about $47,000.
But does not include the debt service, correct?
Correct. The debt service averages about 700,000 a year. It
So
does not.
I'm just a little confused. But that's not, because they said the stuff I have, they requested last year 1,423.
But they're comparing to what they requested, not what we gave them.
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying last year, when we voted on this budget, what did we approve as a board as what we thought was the right budget for them to open up to the public with their new building, fully staffed, and all the hours?
Yeah, I'd have to dig that up, Peggy. All I have is where we ended up.
Right,
in May.
okay.
Yep.
And I was just trying, because if I recall, and I should have had this available today, I mean, the number that they're actually coming back with is actually slightly below that, because they actually have scaled their hours back somewhat. So they're not even, they're, you know, I've always seen this, as we talked about, as them trying to get back to that, you know, operating model that they wanted when times were normal. This is the new building, this full staff, and the hours that they supported through all the different data points they provided on hours.
And by the way, that we promised them to get back to normal.
Right. So I'm just trying to, you know, and I didn't prepare this before, but I was trying to go back and say, okay, this is what we approved last year as their for their total request. Our board did, and we said this is the right model. We were in agreement with the staffing, with the hours of operation and all that stuff. And then compare that to what they're asking for now. And I think if anything, it might be slightly below than what they asked for last year. So that's sort of the two data points. I probably need to get those, but I guess that's why I'm comfortable with their request, because they're basically trying to open up and be normal, like they would have hoped to have done a year ago, but now it's going to be a year later. It's going to be July 1.
Right, but the hours that they've been open really don't have anything to do with the funding they received, right? They received everything from the town plus the PPP money. So they've received in excess of what the town committed to, and they've still had to be closed. So tying the dollars to the hours open right now, I think, is a little confusing.
No, I'm just saying they presented us an operating model of how to run the library. I'm not talking about what money they have now or what PPE they received. I'm just saying they needed a certain budget to sustain their operations for a year under normal times. And I think, you know, July 1, that's what they should be getting. That's all. So
we chose not to do it during through a special appropriation to get them open earlier.
We chose not to do it through a special appropriation.
Right? Didn't we not fund the extra? We were talking at one point about trying to fund the.
We gave them additional funds to offer that so they could have custodial services, and we gave them additional funds to cover a budget shortfall.
Oh, right. It was not right. It was not exactly for headcount, correct.
Right.
But
when
I'm
they
just-
hire those people, they're not going to have the outside service expense that they were going to have. So they're going to discontinue with a private contractor and take that money that they were spending on that private contractor and hire two part-time people.
But wouldn't that be included in this budget? So it's just a.
I'm sure it's in the 242. I think, and at the same time, I think we signaled, and certainly I signaled strongly that out of this 242, 220 of it is just going against their pension obligation, right? They've got a new increased pension obligation,
right,
of 220.
So very little of this is headcount or operation.
Right, and they didn't have that in last year's budget. So actually, they've had to reduce their hours in order to accommodate for that. I guess my point is their total budget. I'm comfortable supporting the operational budget that they had presented last year because that was what we decided was the right thing to have this big, beautiful library open. Sorry, I'm getting calls coming in here. And I'm just trying to remember the numbers now. So, and my understanding is, that this budget reflects that operating model that we agreed to last year. So, we can go back and forth about when they hired people. This last year was like just a weird year, right, for them because they still had to hire people. They still had to stock the shelves. They still had to pay the utilities. And they,
we have 10 minutes before our next meeting. Can we just do a quick straw poll of just where we are with the library? And if we're all good, then let's move on so we can.
I have a question.
Yeah, of course you do. Of course you do. How are those meatballs?
Oh, fish tacos, but very good. Thank you. So if Peggy, so do you feel that if by restoring them to what they were at, that it's safe to assume we won't get any special appropriation requests during next year?
If we restore them,
never say never.
Yeah,
I'm not going to hold you to it, but I'm just saying, like,
I wouldn't
under that theory.
I wouldn't expect
it either.
No. I mean, they've never had like a normal budget for 5 years because of they got the budget cut and then they went into the smaller space. And then, I just feel like we got to right size them, put them on the right path and let them manage their budgets going forward. That's kind of what we were doing with the ambulance. And what we're doing again, we're right sizing their budget so they can hire adequate staff at the ambulance and provide the services that they need to provide. I was hoping we wouldn't have to do another significant increase this year, but it's been a pandemic and they've been hit hard with trying to maintain staffing and they realized they needed to pay people more to sustain their staffing. So that's kind of the approach I've taken to this all along. And I spent a lot of time last year with the library going through their budget and their operating model. And it is all driven by hours of operation, Bruce. Not all of it, but a lot of it is, right? They need a certain number of people in the facility for the hours that are open. And they walked through all that last year. So that's my thoughts.
Let's take a straw vote.
We're just gauging interest. I'm supporting it as is to move forward as is.
I'm supporting it as well.
We need to move the number forward to the voters for referendum. We don't approve budgets. We simply recommend them on for referendum. And I think we need to give the voters something to vote on. We did get a lot of letters in support of the library. So let's move this number forward.
That was like such a politician answer. So are you actually supporting it?
I think
you kind of weaved around it, my man.
I think our job in this situation is to move stuff forward for the voters.
But do you support it?
What do you mean by support it? Do I think it's the best budget for the town? I'm concerned about a 4.3% increase to the town budget.
No, just that number, not the big number. Just the library.
But we are the part that we control is the town.
All right. You're not going to answer me. I tried.
I'm
Well,
good with the number.
Hey, as long as he's comfortable moving it
Yeah,
forward.
he is. I know.
to the
I'm
next
always like, we had
stage,
him at hello, so why push
I
him?
think,
I backed off.
yeah. Aaron, what are your thoughts?
I'm okay with moving it forward.
Okay.
Move it forward.
Switzerland, I like it.
All right,
Well-
so, we're done?
Yes. All in favor? Can we just raise our hands and say that we like that budget so that we can straw poll it?
You got everything in there, Stacy? You got everything?
What else do we need to vote on? That was it, right?
Yeah, I think, well, we just have to do the whole package then, right? So Stacy, procedure here on this? I forget.
Do we lose her?
I'm sorry, I was talking on mute. Honey is on here.
Okay,
Okay, so this would be the total town budget that we can vote on right now. It's
429.
$29,285,417.
So moved.
Stacy, does this motion need to be in any special form?
I think the total budget, we should motion the total town budget.
I motion the total town budget at 29,285,417 at 4.29% increase.
I'll second that.
all right. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yay!
Aye.
Yes.
Okay, all right, guys, thank you. We all have, we have 9 minutes to.
Everybody say hi to
whenever we
Justin
come
too.
for a
Justin's
break.
been listening the whole meeting,
So-
so say hi to Justin.
Okay, do we log off or is it different? Yeah, okay.
Oh, we
Yeah,
did?
it's a different link for your 7 o'clock, and I will go ahead and cancel your Thursday budget workshop.
Nice.
Okay, wait, though. Do
But
we
wait,
need that?
there's more.
Right, we need that for what
You
else?
almost had it.
Island Avenue RFP if you want to have a special meeting at the same time.
Yeah, you guys, we wanted to do a special meeting on that, so we could just get that done. It'd probably just be a half-hour discussion, so since the time's slotted, do you want to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Let's keep it moving.
good. All right, see you in a bit. Bye.
Okay.
Uh,